to another interview with the Vocero Hispano. Just last year, we had our new chief of the Grand Rapids Police Department, Eric Winstrom, here with us to learn a little bit about his background, where he was coming from, what his goals were, and basically just to get to know him here. So now a year later, we have him here again, and we're really happy to have him. We appreciate your time, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's your 1-year anniversary, so we just wanted to kind of look back and see what has changed or what have been some of your accomplishments or any goals that you have achieved within the year. Not sure if you have any.
Yeah, well, it's been a challenging year, but it has been a very productive year. It feels like about 10 years. We've done so much. We've changed so many policies, changed so much training, had a lot of turnover as far as our personnel as well. We have a new deputy chief, new captains, I should say. We've done some reorganization in the police department. We've highlighted the Training and Engagement Bureau, which is a new division of the police department to elevate the both training, community engagement, and recruiting, which is so vital and critical to our success moving forward. So reorganization of the police department as a whole, and the policies and training, and then just getting out to meeting the community. As you know, I was last year about this time, I didn't know hardly anybody. You know, I feel like I've met so many people in Grand Rapids. I'm still making those connections, but really trying to learn the city and connect the police department closer with the city. So it's been quite a year, challenging year, but I'm very optimistic about this next year coming up and the summer, and I think we're headed in a very good direction.
Okay. Yeah, I think I agree. I've seen you in many different events, and I've seen you connecting with the community, so I think that's a great start that you had.
Thank you.
We know that in the beginning it was a little bit rough. I wanted to mention about the Patrick Leoya case that I'm pretty sure everybody is aware of, that basically involved one of the ex-officers from the Grand Rapids Police Department, and I believe that a lot of things have changed within. I know you wanted to focus a lot on transparency. That's something you mentioned last year. How have you been working with the transparency part within the department?
Well, transparency was one of the things that I committed to when I was hired and as part of the hiring process. And I did not expect an incident like the Leoya shooting to come up, certainly not so fast, but that was unfortunately an opportunity to put to the test if the police department really was committed to transparency. And part of that, of course, was being upfront with the community, telling them the facts that we knew as soon as we knew them, and then getting that the video out, which I believe we did 9 days after the incident, which was something that the Grand Rapids Police Department certainly had never done before so quickly. And even since that shooting, which was April 4th, we've had 3 other officer-involved shootings where our officers have fired their guns, and I think I've been consistent and faithful to my transparency commitment, where I would have press conferences as soon as possible to give the information that we had at the time, and then release the video sometimes as soon as about within 48 hours, so that the public knew that they were seeing that we weren't holding anything back. We want to be as transparent as possible.
Yeah. The other issue has been the trust that the community has with police officers and law enforcement. How have you seen that this past year? Has it kind of gotten better, or do you think that there's still some work to be done?
One of the things when I was hired was I'd get a lot of questions from reporters, from journalists asking, how are you going to rebuild trust? And with the community conversations that I've had, it seems like I don't know that trust ever really existed. So I really felt like I was starting on the ground floor building trust, and part of that was a commitment to get out, talking to people, being as transparent as possible, answering any questions, not shying away from hard conversations. I went to a lot of community meetings where there was a lot of passion, a lot of anger, a lot of people that really just wanted to yell at me, and they wanted to be heard. And I just made a commitment that I would stand there and I would listen, because people needed to be heard, and I wanted to let people know that the Grand Rapids Police Department is listening. No matter how difficult the conversation is, I'm going to come, I'm going to listen, I'm going to engage. So I think that's been helpful to build the trust, that people at least know that I'm listening. I think they can see the evidence of following up on my commitments with the changes I've made in the policy, the changes I've made in transparency, the changes that I've made in training that we're going through. So it's not just not just words. I going to follow up and I'm going to follow through on my commitments.
Yeah, you mentioned training. I wanted to talk about that. I know that I believe there has been some changes of how police officers approach people, especially with traffic stops. Has there been something specific that kind of changed there?
We're always evolving. People talk about police reform, and the policing in general has reformed so much since, when I was a new police officer in the year 2000 is when I started. The job is completely different. I know it's completely different today in 2023, and I expect it to look totally different in 2043. So we are committed to reforming, which is always getting better. And so anytime training comes up that we look at and we say, this is a better way to do something, we're never going to get to the point in the Grand Rapids Police Department where we say, all right, we're there and we're complacent now. We're always going to be looked to make sure we're the gold standard. We're going to be doing things best. So yeah, I brought in outside trainers because sometimes it's good to have a fresh perspective from outside. Even outside the police world, I brought in two civilian trainers from the Los Angeles area to come in and work on de-escalation, work on self-regulation, teach constitutional policing. As well, where we developed a program with the Office of Public Accountability, Office of Oversight and Public Accountability, Director Brandon Davis, where we have community-informed police training. And that is community members would come to me and say, hey, we want, for example, the deaf and hard of hearing community came and said, hey, we think your officers need to know better how to interact with individuals in the deaf and hard of hearing community. And now we're at a point where we have this program in place where we say, okay, you tell us what you want our officers to know, and we're going to put it in training. And for example, that community is developing a roll call training video of about an hour so that they create the training for our officers, because as I've always said, a city is entitled to be policed how it wants to be policed, and it's entitled to have its police officers trained in what is important to them. So as the community comes up with ideas, we want officers to know this or that, we're going to be able to train our officers how the city wants it done. Yeah, we're really excited about that program.
Yeah, that sounds great, and I'm happy that that's happening. I
Thanks.
think there's been a lot of that necessity years ago, and I'm glad that's finally happening. So,
Thank you. Me too.
And with training as well, I just wanted to touch base on, I know that school is almost over, summer is coming up, kids won't be in school anymore, but the new school year, it kind of brings some worries for parents and community members. We've seen a lot of school shootings happening all over the nation. So my question is the Grand Rapids Police Department working or training on school shootings or preparing for that? We know we don't want it to happen, but it's always better to be prepared.
Absolutely. And, coming off of the Uvalde shooting, we got a lot of inquiries at the chief's office and city leadership from elected officials to elected officials. There was a lot of conversation. Is the Grand Rapids Police Department prepared to handle a school violence incident in the proper way and not, a lot of the concern coming out of that incident in Texas was the police officers seemed to freeze and not really know who was in charge or what to do. Well, I am happy to say that we've trained on it prior to my arrival, that the officers have trained, and the goal is to get in to stop the threat, to save kids if, God forbid, a school violence incident, but really any active shooter incident where there's a threat to the public. The first instinct of the police officer, the first mandate of the police officer is to go in and stop that threat. And we do train. So to get to the point where the officers are going to do that, it takes training. I would much rather be able to get good at something like that through training than through experience. Hopefully we never experience something like that. So we are committed to training. Even since I've been here, I think we've done 3 active shooter trainings as a whole with the fire department, with our partners over at Grand Rapids Community College. We have a close relationship with GVSU. Any of these organizations, either school or otherwise, that have large facilities that want to do training with us for active shooter situations, we're willing to do that. We have our federal partners that come in, they'll do training too. Department of Homeland Security does it. So train, you just can't train enough. We always want, good training. We've been invited into Grand Rapids Public Schools and other schools, Calvin universities, Aquinas, others, to actually use their facilities as well, to have our officers trained. And to do that with the fire department, with school security. GRPS has its own security system in place. We have a great relationship with them. The head of that, of GRPS security, is he's a retired Grand Rapids police sergeant, so we have a friendship and close relationship. So we are prepared. we're going to keep it up, that we continue to be prepared, and hopefully it's just something that we're very good at through training, and we never actually have to put in practice.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we've just seen so many cases, and it's very sad and heartbreaking, but like we mentioned, it's always better to be prepared and kind of make sure that you guys are able to do the job correctly and safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to mention too, that recently the Michigan State University, they had an active shooter incident there, and I'm friends with Marlon Lynch, the chief of police for MSU, was the chief of police at the University of Chicago when I worked for the Chicago Police Department. So we have that relationship going back, and my heart broke that night. But collectively, as a law enforcement community in Michigan, you saw all over the state, people started to mobilize and say, all right, MSU is in trouble. We need to come together. And I know the Kent County Sheriff sent an armored vehicle and several deputy sheriffs. We sent 7 officers, a supervisor, and our armored rescue vehicle in. And we were there, an hour or so later, evacuating people from the sports stadium there and doing our part. So it's something that hopefully, never comes to the city of Grand Rapids, but we do have experience in it, and we are trained for it.
Okay, that's something good to hear, that you guys are being involved, helping, and training for it. But also with the good weather, there's always something that kind of comes negatively. We've seen here in the city of Grand Rapids that the violence kind of increases a little bit. More crime is being involved or committed, and a lot of car thefts are happening. We saw that last year too with a lot of car thefts. There was a group called the Kia Boys. What has kind of happened with the whole car thefts? Have you seen it kind of decrease, or how are you guys preparing for that?
Yeah, and to your point, the data shows that, yes, because school is out, because it's warmer, the data shows that in the summer months across at least the northern United States, there's always a spike in crime, unfortunately. So we do anticipate that. We have had meetings with our partners in the prosecutor's office, state juvenile department, to talk about what we can do differently, because what we saw last year with the Kia and the Hyundai thefts was that these vehicles were extremely easy to steal. It was something that these kids were posting on social media, and they were young. They were as young as 12 years old or so, going out stealing cars and then engaging in extremely dangerous behavior, sometimes even more serious violent behavior, drive-by shootings and things. So we took it very seriously, but what we realized was that we were sometimes arresting the same kids multiple times in a week. So there was no accountability in the rest of the criminal justice system. I think that's shifted as collectively, at least in Kent County, all of the law enforcement leadership said, hey, we're doing our job. We're safely arresting these kids. We're identifying who's doing this. What other adults in this system are going to step up and take responsibility and put a stop to this? So we've seen a significant decrease in the volume. I know at some point in time during last summer, we were averaging 4 thefts or attempted thefts of just Kias or Hyundais every single day. So that's dropped significantly, to more like 1 or so. But the problem does continue with a lot of those vehicles. There has been some communication with the manufacturers. There has been talk of recalls, a talk of supplying Kia and Hyundai owners with different anti-theft devices. So I think the problem's going to subside over time. It will be less this year than it was last year, but it's still something that we're concerned about as well. I just brought to the City Commission a proposal to purchase drones for the first time for the Grand Rapids Police Department. Most of the agencies, especially larger agencies in the area, already have drones. The Sheriff's Department, the State Police, even many much smaller towns than us. But using what would be called a small unmanned aerial vehicle or a drone to track down a stolen vehicle is a much safer way than having a police officer pursue that car and potentially that stolen vehicle then gets in a wreck. If you have a 12-year-old driving 90 miles an hour down a city street, it's extremely dangerous. So generally speaking, we don't engage in a pursuit. If you have the ability to have a drone follow that vehicle until it stops, and then you can safely at least recover the vehicle, if not make an arrest, to deliver that kid to the juvenile justice program, that's the much better way to go. Yeah. So it's something we're looking forward to having as another tool.
Okay. Do you believe that it might get approved to get the drones, or?
Yeah, I am confident. Okay. Like I said, there's so many. There's going to be discussion about it. There's going to be community engagement. We're going to talk to others in the community. But there are so many smaller police departments just in this immediate area that it's not a controversial thing. It's simply another tool. It's a vehicle used to put a camera in the air is what it is. We're not going to be using it for surveillance. We're simply going to be using it to take pictures, as in crime scene reconstruction, violent crime scene reconstruction. Obviously, finding it's kind of problematic to me that the second biggest police department in the state of Michigan doesn't have the ability, if a toddler goes missing in woods, to put a drone up. Where we would have to call the state police or the Kent County Sheriff to get that. Where there's police departments only 1/10 of our size that say, oh yeah, we're going to protect our citizens, we're going to purchase these drones and we're going to use them. So a fleeing felon, an individual that's armed himself with a gun and heading in a direction that it would be safer to send a drone than a police officer, it just makes sense to have them. It's just communicating with the community and letting them know the sensitivity for surveillance per se. I understand. We are not going to be surveilling anyone with it. This is going to be used as a camera in the sky, not surreptitiously, not secretly. It's going to be used for law enforcement functions. And then we're going to report out to the community very publicly, this is how we use the drones, this is when and where we use the drones, this is what we use the drones for. And again, mentioning the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability, Director Brandon Davis, he's actually going to be in charge of reviewing that information and auditing our use. And if there's any complaints, he can receive those. So I don't anticipate any complaints about surveillance of the drones because we're simply not going to be using them for that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think it is necessary to have that
Thank
to
you.
solve more crimes.
Appreciate that.
And just one last thing is, what can you tell the community for any crimes that they're witnessing or probably have experienced, but they're afraid to talk about it or report it?
Well, I'll tell you, it is important to get that information to the police department because if we're not getting that information, there's no way for us to collect data on it. Obviously, there's no way for us to address that specific crime. But oftentimes, if it's a lower level crime and people just aren't calling, we'll become unaware of it. Know that, hey, there was a way that we could mitigate this by either utilizing police officers or some other means. And if we're not aware of it, there's nothing we can do. Oftentimes there's hesitancy where it comes to violent crimes that people don't want to get involved in the criminal justice process, whether for fear of retaliation or something else. And it's important to know that we treat crime victims and crime witnesses as just that, victims and witnesses. We would never take someone coming to us with information about a crime and then start investigating them and say, well, what can we look at about you? So I want people to know that they can freely contact us. And there's always a way through Silent Observer that you can call and make an anonymous tip. In fact, Silent Observer on some crimes, for example, violent crimes, they'll actually pay a reward as well. But if you're not comfortable reaching out directly to the police department, there are anonymous ways to do that, and that Silent Observer is the best way to accomplish that as well.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah. I forgot one question.
Sure.
With the mental health issue, is there something that the Grand Rapids Police Department is doing to kind of help with that? I guess it kind of goes along with the escalation or how to handle a report that's coming through.
Sure. So historically, unfortunately, over the past few decades, as the federal government and state governments have taken a step back in the treatment, their responsibility in the treatment of mental health. Fortunately, it's fallen on municipalities where oftentimes people don't know who to call when they're engaging with an individual mental health crisis, and they end up calling 911. And 911, the default is, well, we'll send a police officer. Well, police officers and social workers, although we have a lot of the same training, more and more every year. But a social worker oftentimes is the right person to be there, not a police officer. So one of the things that we've done is we paired police officers and social workers in a pilot program with Network 180 so that when there is a 911 call where there's some possible safety aspect or public safety aspect where you might want to send a police officer, but also clearly a mental health aspect where you think a social worker would be more appropriate, we're just sending them both. And what we've seen is individuals which in the past may have been sent through the criminal justice system now are not. They're being diverted into the health system for better treatment as well. I actually just had a meeting yesterday with Network 180, and they we're having groundbreaking, I want to say in May, I believe, for a 16-bed mental health treatment facility that they're very excited about. I think it's going to be a tremendous positive impact. It's in joint partnership with St. Mary's, and it's going to have a great impact on West Michigan. So we're excited about that as well.
Okay, that sounds awesome. I know that a lot of people have been going through mental health issues. I think we see it more and more every day.
Yep.
So I think it's a great start, and that's pretty much it. I want to congratulate you on your first year.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys inviting me back for a year. It seems like just yesterday I was here meeting you for the first time, so it means a lot that you had me back.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And I know that there's a lot of more great work that's going to happen within the department. So
I'm excited for it. Thank you.
Thank you. For more interviews in English and Spanish, you can visit elvocerous.com, our YouTube page, El Vocero Hispano TV, and our Facebook page, El Vocero Hispano.